This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 179. Is that right? Or was
179.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Man, we're getting on up there. Today we are talking the three things, well, not the three, but three things that every business should be doing regularly, including yours. All right. I am Craig, your host. Over there, he's Chris. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing well. How about you, Craig?
I'm all right. I got to be honest, though. I'm starting to itch a little bit. Literally, I'm breaking out in hives because I saw some stuff in here that was a reminder of my own time, both working at corporations and running my own business and all that, where it's just like, some of this stuff, I got to be honest, Chris, not the most fun thing you can do with your day, but still necessary. And some of it's not so bad.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that statement. It's what we're going to talk about today. Specifically, one of the things is not the most fun thing to do in the world, but it's so impactful. And we've talked a little bit in the past about getting out of your comfort zone, and sometimes sometimes you have to buckle down and do the things you don't want to do because they're important. Yep, eat your spinach. That's what this is.
Yep. All right. So today we're going to eat some spinach. I am going to remind everybody, of course, to go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes. Go to MotorCarrierHQ.com for the tools, tips, and people that you need to make the jump from employee driver to owner operator. And lastly, if you want to learn some of this stuff on your own, speaking of making that leap, you can do so at HaulinAssetsAcademy.com, where you can find several courses that are going to set you up for success in your eventual business ventures. All you truckers out there, it's awesome. Go check it out, HaulinAssetsAcademy.com. All right, Chris, we've got today a lot to go over. And I think a lot of it is going to be given to the third item on our list. Okay, this is me doing a professional tease, right? The third one is the big one, in a lot of ways. But before we do all that, tales from the road. How are things looking out there?
It's we're into June. May and the beginning of June have been kind of interesting. We've had a few more trucks off the road than we normally like to see for a myriad of different reasons, from medical to breakdowns to vacations and everything in between. So I'm going to be interested to see how May's numbers come out. I haven't really looked too far into them yet. It's going to be a little interesting. To be quite honest, I'm maybe a little bit scared to see what May shows. We've had a string of pretty dang good months together. I'm not sure about May.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. We'll do the May financials. For those who are new to the podcast, if you're not, then you know this already. But for those who are new, we check in on the financials of the company every month. And so we look at those usually on the tail end of the following month. So right now we're recording this in early mid-June. And we'll look at May's financials in the latter half of June. So look forward to that, or don't. Look forward with some trepidation, perhaps.
We'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yep.
But one of the things, kind of alluding into that we had happens, super interesting, really random. So we've been in business for 6 years, and we've had, for the most part, we've got 11 trucks now. We've been in that number, in that range for a couple of years at this point.
Right.
And in the entire time, we've had one clutch go out until a couple weeks ago, when we had two clutches go out in two different trucks within 24 hours of each other. Super fun. Both of them had to get towed.
Are they the same kind of engine?
No, they're not. One of them, the first one that went out was our oldest Freightliner.
Okay.
And the second one that went out was one of our newest trucks, and it was the Kenworth. One of them was an auto, one of them was a manual.
Freak coincidence.
And the experience we had at two different dealerships were night and day. And these trucks are both out of the state, long ways away, so we had to get them fixed at different locations. The Kenworth was in and out of the shop in 4 days. The Freightliner was, do you want to take a guess?
Oh gosh. Well, if you say 4 days and that's the fast one, I'm terrified.
Yeah, 14 days.
14 days off the road.
Yeah, and this dealership was like every little excuse they could come up with to delay it, or anything that could possibly delay it. You take, for example, the truck battery was dead. They come in, they'd done some work on it, they went and parked it. They must have left something on.
Yeah.
Battery died. And so rather than just jumping the thing and getting it into the shop,
they ordered a new battery.
Well, no, these things have 4 batteries.
Right.
They they don't call us. They just shoot an email, after the fact, hey, what do you want us to do here?
Fix it.
Fix it. Yeah.
Freaking fix it.
Just get it into the shop so you can diagnose the clutch. So that delayed things a few days. It's stuff like that. Rather than trying to find a timely solution for it, there's an excuse to put this truck off to the side so we can work on another one or do something else, or just dumb little things like that. It just added up to, a job that should take a few days to almost a couple weeks.
I've had some good bosses in the past who have this this kind of idea that, yes, I want you to let me know when there's a problem, but you need to come to me with a potential solution. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best idea, but is there anything we can do about it? Because a problem without a solution, in the famous quote, a problem without a solution isn't a problem. They call you up and say, well, the batteries, or they email you, even worse, right? Yeah. They email you and say, what do you want us to do here? It's like, I want you to fix it. Don't tell me what the problem is. Tell me what your solution is. Yeah. Anyway, that's really frustrating. So how much do you chalk that up to the individual shop, and how much of it is culture at the larger company, right? So is this a Kenworth versus Freightliner difference, or do you think it's just the individual shop?
Just the individual shop, because we have the opposite issue in Salt Lake.
Right.
We have the Freightliner shop functions way better. Things get in and out of there much more quickly than they do in the Salt Lake Kenworth.
So we're not trying to abuse Freightliner here.
It's not Freightliner, it's not Kenworth, it's the individual shop.
Okay, good.
Some shops are run really well, others not so much.
All right. Well, Chris, do you want to talk about some regular business practices that people should be doing?
Let's do it.
All right.
I've got 3 things that I want to talk about that I think every business should do on a regular basis. We'll talk about what does regular mean as we get into this, but let's talk about the 3 things. So first, you need to review your expenses on a regular basis so you can find stuff where you can trim the fat.
Okay.
2, look at, I think I gave those out of order. The first one was actually revenue. Find new sources of revenue. Second, review your expenses. And the third one is do a SWOT analysis. And I know there's a lot of people out there, they're going to be like, what, a SWOT what? And
swatting it as a verb is a very different thing on the internet, Chris.
This is not a verb, SWOT. It's an acronym that stands for something. We'll talk a little bit more when we get to it, but we're going to cover those three things in that order: revenue, expenses, and SWOT. And we're going to spend the vast majority of our time, like you said, on the last one, on SWOT analysis, because the other 2 are a little bit more cut and dry. Yeah,
it's cut and dry, but it's interesting that you put them in that order because, like you say, this is a specific order. And whether it's your personal finances or your business finances, whatever you are dealing with, the first thing you need to look at is how much am I bringing in?
Yep.
Because without knowing that number, the expenses, it's still going to be important, but you can't do much about it. You can't budget. You can't understand your expenses without understanding your revenue, right?
And the way I kind of look at business, this is my opinion. There's going to be people that have a little bit of different opinion, but a good revenue stream will solve a lot of problems. If you can, if you're consistently good at bringing in the trucking world, good, high quality freight, that can cause some inefficiencies on the expense side, the back end. So
allow for inefficiencies.
Allow for some inefficiencies, yeah. So if you can be good at bringing in revenue, that's such a big part of the challenge and the problem.
So you're going to tell us that at least twice a year you should be doing all these things, right? And let's talk about what those are. The first one is look for new revenue sources. Now, all right, let me put on my I don't know anything about trucking hat and say, what do you mean, Chris? You put something in your truck, you drive over the road, you deliver it, and rinse and repeat. That's your revenue source. What am I missing?
So that's the very simplified version of it, but there's a big difference. We talk a lot about using a load board versus using shippers, direct relationships with shippers. Load boards are going to have lower paying freight typically. Relationships with direct shippers are typically going to be higher paying freight. But even with that shipper situation, there can be some shippers that pay really, really good rates and other shippers that just pay, okay, decent rates. And so it's a really good idea. One of the buzz terms that you hear in business all the time, whether it's running and managing an operating business or investing in stocks or anything else, you hear diversify, right? You should always diversify. And that's just as true with revenue as it is with anything else. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. For instance, if you've got a contract with one shipper and you've got multiple trucks and that contract goes away, then all of a sudden you don't have your revenue stream. If you're an owner operator and you've just got one customer that you haul all of your freight for, and that customer either finds another carrier or they go out of business or they move or something else happens, all of a sudden you don't have a customer. And so you want to have multiple revenue streams. That kind of protects yourself, especially if you've got multiple trucks and a larger fleet. When I say larger fleet, like anything over a handful of trucks, because, then, if one of your customers or one of your revenue streams goes down, you've got something else you can rely on. At least part of your fleet is being taken care of.
So what you're telling me then is you're not diversifying in like you haul freight and you open a Winnebago dealership. You're talking about just making sure that you have multiple customers, multiple ways to haul freight and folks to haul freight for.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And it can be a little bit... Well, go ahead.
Hang on. Let me ask you one more question on this, because you've talked a lot in the past about the benefits of direct shipper relationships. Is there any danger in throwing... Even if it's, let's say you've got 6 great direct shipper relationships, but you never go on the load boards, right? Is there any danger in putting all of your eggs in one category, even if it's not one single shipper?
I feel like that's much less of a problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially when you're looking at, hey, should I still work off the load board every once in a while? No, because that's something you can jump in and out of all the time. Like, it's not going to go
There's no
away.
barrier to entry there. Okay.
So I don't think that's an issue. I think it's more, make sure you've got several shippers. And if you're doing everything directly with shippers, you're probably killing it.
Okay. All right. So is it, you've talked about if you have a handful of trucks, you want to operate this way. What about owner-operator, single truck?
It gets a little more tricky with owner-operators because there's only so much you can do, right? There's only so many, you've got one truck, you can only haul so many loads. And if you're trying to split your time between 2 different shippers, you may get to the point where one or both of those shippers are like, hey, you're not doing enough for me to make it worth maintaining this relationship. So it's probably more important to retain the relationship. And if you feel like you've got to dedicate your truck to that one shipper to maintain that relationship, then that's probably the route you need to go. But if you can have somebody that you haul loads for every once in a while, so they know you're reliable, they know how to work with you, even if it's one every other month, that's better than nothing.
Right.
Like, you've got somebody else that that you can work with, that you can haul loads for on occasion.
Perfect. All right, let's talk about reviewing expenses then. So this would be what comes next. At least every 6 months, you go in and review your expenses. Now, do you guys, we talk about finances every month, so you're at least looking at the surface numbers of your expenses and your revenue. But are you talking about a deeper dive than what we do here?
Yep, a deeper dive. Like, actually look at, okay, what shop am I using? Is there a way I can trim the fat a little bit with the shop? Even if it's, hey, my truck has to drive 20 miles to go to this shop. It only has to drive 5 miles to go to this shop. And both shops are kind of on equal playing ground. Drive to the 5 mile shop. That saves you a little bit in fuel. If your driver's driving that, it's saving driver pay. If it's you driving it, it's saving your time, and your time has a value to it. So it's kind of going into every little expense to that detail. If you're using 2 load boards, you're paying for 2 load boards. Do you really need those 2 load boards? One example that this is more from your personal life than it is your business life, but it gives you the idea. If you think about your TV viewing experience, do you have Netflix and Hulu and HBO and Showtime and a cable subscription? Do you have all those? Do you really need all those? Do you need to be paying for all of those?
All I need is BritBox, man. I need my BBC shows.
There you go. Yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so what you're saying is taking the personal side of it as our analogy here. It's like you sign up for something and then you're happy you've got it. You watch the show, you binge the heck out of Andor or whatever you're watching these days, and then you kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
You don't go back to Netflix or Disney for a while and okay, so I've kind of forgotten about it. And 6 months later, you go check out your bill and you're like, oh, okay, so I've been paying $15 a month or whatever for this service and I'd forgotten about it. No big deal. It's not a crisis, right? You're just reviewing your expenses and saying, that's a place where I can cut. Yep. Great. Okay.
It's not going to cause you too much pain to cut it. Maybe no pain at all.
Right. And yeah, maybe quite the opposite. Okay, good. Anything else on that subject, more specifics you want to get into, or does that pretty much cover it?
That's about it.
Okay. All right. So, Chris, I told you I was itching, breaking out in hives. This next one, the SWOT analysis, SWOT. This is a term with which I am intimately familiar for the most part, because I hate it so much. But I only hate doing it. I love the outcome. Is that fair?
It's like eating your spinach, like you said. You don't, spinach isn't the best tasting thing in the world, but the nutrients, everything it provides.
You should see my Popeye forearms.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, so what is a SWOT analysis?
So a SWOT analysis is a tool that's commonly used in the business world to kind of really evaluate your business. And help you kind of create a game plan or a path to improving your business. So the analysis itself, you're really just looking at 4 things within your business. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you look at that, the first 2 are internal to you, your strengths and weaknesses, and the other 2 are external factors, opportunities and threats. And so kind of what I like to do at this point, just to kind of help people understand, what exactly is this? How can we use it? Let's do a really, really simple SWOT analysis for an owner-operator.
Okay. All right. Let's do it.
So one of the things that I think of as far as a strength for an owner-operator, when I think owner-operators, is they've got very low overhead. They're not paying for a big building that they're leasing for office staff. They're not paying payroll to a big force. They're doing a lot of those things themselves. And so the overhead is really low, which makes your overall expenses as an owner operator typically smaller than what they are for a fleet, especially in these days where you can, kind of jump on, like for instance, with our fuel pricing. If you use FuelStream, you're getting a very similar cost of fuel to what a big guy gets. So the economies of scale that come with bigger fleets, you can still get a lot of those same benefits as an owner operator. And so one of your big strengths is truly lower overhead. Another really common one for your strengths is your predictable service. Especially when you get up into the bigger fleets, you've got all these drivers with lots of different personalities, different ways that they operate. Most fleets don't do a really good job of retaining good drivers. And so they're constantly late. They're constantly not communicating well. They're not providing that higher level of service that you as an owner operator running your own business that truly, truly cares about your reputation, you can do that so much better than most other fleets.
Right. It's as the old saying goes, nobody will ever care about your business as much as you do. And that goes for your employees. And that's not a knock on employees, right? This is just human nature. It's totally fine. And it's not even necessarily just that, but something you were alluding to a moment ago. Predicting vacation schedules and sick days. What really counts as a sick day and what's somebody who just kind of wanted a day off and so they took a quote unquote sick day. Totally happens. We've all been there. Again, I'm not making some grand moral judgment, but you as the owner operator, you're much more predictable in what you know you're going to be out there doing and giving to the business. Right.
Yep.
Okay, good. So those are some of the strengths. Any other strengths worth mentioning? I mean, you said this is a simple analysis.
I want to keep it simple. So yeah.
So that's an example of the type of thing we're talking about for an owner operator. What about weaknesses?
So a weakness of an owner operator, you've only got one truck. So some customers won't even talk to you. Like, some customers are going to say, hey, I want a fleet with at least 5 to 10 trucks. I need that kind of volume before it starts making a dent. Not everybody's like that. That's kind of one of the myths of trucking is that you can't really get relationships with direct shippers unless you've got 10 trucks.
Right. Just depends on the size and type of the shipper.
Sometimes it's easier, but there are some shippers that don't want to talk to that big fleet because they don't have that kind of volume. And so you can find those. So, it is a weakness, but it's also like most every weakness that there is out there is something that you can overcome. Mm-hmm. So just the fact that you have one truck, and this is kind of similar. The second one that I was thinking about is redundancy. If you're an owner operator and you go in to start your truck and
it's sitting for 14 days, right?
you don't have another truck that you can jump into to go, take care of a specific load. Right. So that's another weakness that you can have. And every company out there has weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to get more into this, but the whole point is you don't want to be that ostrich with your head in the sand. The point of kind of thinking about this is, okay, here are my weaknesses. It's a vulnerability. What can I do to fix it?
Yeah. If you're the company that just coasts, so to speak, these trucking analogies come unbidden, Chris. But if you're just coasting as a company and you think everything's going to be fine, I'm doing great, or we're too big to fail, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me introduce you to a little company called Sears, right? You can coast yourself into oblivion.
Absolutely.
So, all right, let's go on. So that's strengths and weaknesses. Now the O stands for opportunities. And you said these second two are more external, right? Yep. So what is opportunities?
So an opportunity, thinking about in the trucking world could be something like a new manufacturer opening up in your area. Well, this manufacturer is going to have stuff shipped. And so they're going to have a need that they don't have filled. That's a great time to walk in and, as you see a building going up or you see something happen, find the right contact and say, hey, I want to ship stuff for you when you're up and going. Mm. Another opportunity could be something like the trucking company down the road went out of business. Well, who have they typically hauled loads for? All of a sudden, they're not, their customers are going to have a huge urgent need that they need filled. And that's a perfect chance for you to kind of go in and say, hey, I'm here. I heard your vendor went out of business. How can I help?
Right. And it's probably beyond the purview of this episode, but there's probably a whole episode in how do you identify these opportunities and then capitalize on them? How do you find that right contact? How do you figure out who your competitors are shipping for? All that stuff.
It's oftentimes just having your eyes open, being aware of what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so easy in our world to kind of just get stuck in doing the same thing all the time and not really thinking about what you're doing. But, like this whole SWOT analysis, I talked about, I haven't talked about it yet, but I think it's something that needs to be done at least twice a year. Right. Kind of a formal process twice a year where you go in and do a SWOT analysis. But that doesn't mean that you can't, as you're driving down the road,
have your eyes open.
Have your eyes open and be thinking about it. Hey, what's one of my weaknesses? What opportunities might there be? And just especially opportunities, just kind of, you've got to keep your eye open. and your ears open, and you'll hear things, you'll see things. If you're constantly kind of thinking about that, things will just kind of fall in your lap to a certain extent.
Which is the perfect way to segue into the T in SWOT analysis, right? The threats. So we've talked about opportunities, and now there's threats, another external thing. Again, it kind of seems self-explanatory, but let's go over it. What is a threat to your company from outside?
So one of the first things I want to talk about is just competitors. We all have competitors. Trucking is, every other trucking company out there is a competitor, essentially. And the important thing to know is you kind of almost want to do a little mini SWOT analysis on your competitors. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How can you exploit their weaknesses? That kind of thing. Understanding your competitors is one of the ways that you can mitigate them as a threat.
Okay.
The second one is just really kind of the economy in general, or the market in general. How do you, prepare yourself, or how do you be in a position that you can manage things if there's a downturn in the economy?
Or the freight market specifically.
Or the freight market. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So we've got our SWOT analysis, SWOT. And again, this is one of those things where if you've never heard this term before, get your shots, inoculate yourself, because you need to talk about this a lot. This is something that I can't afford to be allergic to the way I am if I want to be a business owner, right? This is extremely important stuff. So you've got your strengths and your weaknesses, your opportunities and your threats. Chris, what do we do with this information? We have the information now. I know what my strengths and weaknesses are, for instance, but I've been rolling down the road now for 6 years, and this is just who I am. This is who my company is. This is our DNA. No point in changing, right?
Yeah, well, that's a good way to work yourself into oblivion. One thing that I really like to do is I like to match up, okay, here's one of my strengths, here's the opportunities. This strength aligns really well with this opportunity. And this is I don't know that it's necessarily the best example in the world, but it's a good example. We talked a little bit about one of the strengths of an owner-operator is they typically have lower overhead, so they have lower operating cost. And you can kind of go in and to a certain extent undercut your competition. And so, your competitors may be able to operate at $2.75 a mile, but maybe you can come in at $2.65 a mile. And so, that opportunity with a brand new manufacturer that opens up and, you say, hey, they're new. They probably are really trying to manage expenses because that new phase is costly and it's hard. And so there's probably no more important time for them to be trimming their own fat, and transportation is a way that they can do that. And so you can still be profitable at $2.65, or maybe your competitor can't be profitable at that price. And so that's a good example of lining a strength up with an opportunity and using that strength to capitalize on an opportunity.
Love that. Okay. And so does the same thing hold true then with weaknesses and threats? You need to know, are my weaknesses lining up with potential threats down the road? Do these line up that way?
Yeah, you absolutely can. But it's you kind of have to do the exact opposite thing, right? This weakness makes me exceptionally vulnerable to this particular threat. You may have a strength that is good against a particular threat, and you may not have to worry about that one as much. Does that make sense? But if you've got a weakness that aligns with a threat, that kind of almost makes you double vulnerable. And so that may be like, okay, this is the weakness I really need to work on, because if this threat comes to fruition, it's really going to put me in a difficult situation.
And would some of these things, you talked about some of the strengths of an owner-operator and some of the weaknesses there. Are some of these things inherent? So I'm thinking of, as I'm lining these things up in my head, you talked about, hey, the bigger company is going to have to charge you $2.75. I can charge you $2.65 because of my lower overhead. Okay, great. But are you then kind of stuck in that lower tier as an owner operator, so that when the threat comes along of a market downturn, you can't really, you have no choice but to try to undercut, and so now you're losing money on every load? Are some of these inherent, or would you say there's never a weakness that you can't improve on?
I would typically say there's usually not weaknesses you can improve on. And I would even say, that $2.65 a mile, that might be just a way for you to get your foot in the door.
Right.
Right. You can operate at that. So it's not going to kill you to operate that. And it may be what it takes to get your foot in the door. But once you get your foot in the door, you prove your value, you prove your worth, you can typically, increase that up closer to a true market value.
Right.
The market value might be at 275, but because you can operate at 265, that gets your foot in the door. And then later on down the road, you can push that up.
Okay, good. So what else do we need to know about this concept? What else am I missing?
One of the things I want to talk a little bit about, this threat with the economy, it's a good opportunity to talk about this. It's something I like to talk about on a regular basis, just to remind everybody that the economy is going to always go up and down. There's going to be cycles with that. Right now we're in kind of a down cycle. There's no getting away from it. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in business, whether it's in trucking businesses or any other kind of business, is that when times are good, they base their expenses off of the good times. And this becomes especially bad when in their personal expenses. So you take
personal or personnel?
Personal expenses.
So
you take, for example, things are going really well. The economy's good. You're making good money. You're super profitable.
You buy the truck.
You go buy the truck. You buy this big home that, you can make the payments right now. Not a big deal. But can you make the payments when the market turns?
Yeah.
You kind of have to look at your personal expenses as a fixed cost, right? So we talk about fixed and variable expenses all the time. Your house payment, that's a fixed expense. That's not going to go away. You can't get rid of that when the economy goes down.
Right.
A vacation, on the other hand, you can. Like, you don't have to go on vacation, right? You can put off that expense when things get really bad. And so you want to make sure that whatever you go into with a long-term expense like that, like a vehicle, like a home, that you're only incurring expenses that you can also manage when the economy or the market takes a little bit of a dump. Okay. You got to be careful of that. So one of the things that I recommend when the economy's good and you're thinking about it, that's the time when you spend on maybe more of that extravagant vacation.
Right.
Or instead of buying a super fancy house, maybe you just start putting away more and more money to make a bigger down payment. So later on down the road, you can afford that fancy house, but still have the lower mortgage payment that you can make even when times aren't great.
Okay, good. So how does this apply then? If somebody's listening to this, part of the audience that we target on this show is folks who already own the business. They're owner operators. Maybe they want to grow it. Maybe it's a small fleet and they want to grow theirs. But we also want to talk to those who aren't in business yet. They're still thinking about this stuff. Is this just, we want you to marinate in this sort of concept and be ready for it? Or is there anything people can do now before they're in business yet?
Nope. A SWOT analysis is a great thing to do as you're getting ready to start a business or if you're thinking about doing a business. In fact, most business plans, and you should build a business plan before you go into business. A good business plan is always going to have a SWOT analysis. And you kind of have to put put yourself in your shoes as if you already own a business and think about, hey, this is the type of business I want to operate. What do I think the strengths are going to be? What do I think the weaknesses are going to be, the opportunities and threats? And you kind of still go through that whole analysis. And this does two things for you. One, it makes it so you can decide, is going into business right now the right opportunity for me? And if you decide yes, it will help you be better prepared to navigate those first couple of years of owning a business.
Okay, good. So I spilled the beans a little earlier on how often people should be doing this, right? Twice a year is the recommended, or your recommended frequency, and I'm sure you're not the only one. I can see why it would be detrimental to do it less, right? If you're not doing it enough, then you could be in trouble. It's a little head in the sand situation. Is there any reason not to do it more often? Quarterly, monthly? Okay, weekly would be way too much, right? But is there any reason not to do it more than twice a month or twice a year? I mean,
like with everything, there's an opportunity cost, right? If opportunity cost, if you're not familiar with that term, is, if I spend, if I've got $100 and I spend that on a new tablet, I can't spend that money on a new.
Come up with something good. It better be good.
A new haircut.
Oh, okay, wow.
So that's kind of an opportunity cost. You're limited in money. You're limited in time. If you spend your time and money on thing A, you're not going to have time to spend your time and money on thing B.
Right.
And so if you do a SWOT analysis too often, you kind of, you're using your time on something that would probably be better spent used elsewhere. I don't see I can't really see a need to do it on a monthly basis.
Right.
I think at the most you need to do it once a quarter.
Okay, good. So this will be military man. We're talking about strategy, tactics, and execution, right? And if you so this would be a very strategic way of thinking about your business.
Yep.
And if you spend all of your time fretting over the strategy, you're not actually executing on as much as you should be.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll spend all your time planning and none of your time executing. You'll spend all your time thinking about shippers you could add and none of your time going out and contacting those shippers. And so, yeah, it's a balancing act.
There you go. All right, Chris. Well, I feel like we've covered what you sent over in the notes that we wanted to cover. But am I missing anything else that we want to talk about with the three things? So we've got, first of all, review your revenue sources and find additional ones if necessary. Check out your expenses, okay, and look for ways to cut. What can be cut, trim the fat, as you say. And also recognize, if I can throw this one in there, Chris, we'll call this, what did we used to do at the end of episodes?
2B?
No.
Impact tip?
Yeah, the impact tip. When it comes to your expenses, just remember, for all of you out there hiring drivers and other folks, personnel expenses are nearly impossible to get rid of without pissing off a lot of people, right? And it's not just the person you let go, right?
Yep.
It does damage to your company if you hire too quickly and then you end up having to let people go, right? So be very careful. It's a lot easier to trim expenses around, load boards than it is to hire somebody because, I just can't be bothered to do my bookkeeping and then have to fire that person when there's a downturn, right? So be very careful with your personnel expenses, especially. All right, so revenue, expenses, and then do those SWOT analyses twice a year, and you should be sitting pretty, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay, Chris, good tips. And I'll just remind everybody else to head to HaulinAssetsLLC.com this is the show's website. You can go to Motor Carrier HQ. That's who sponsors the show, and that's where you get the tools, tips, and people to help you make that jump to owner-operator. And then lastly, HaulinAssetsAcademy.com. Chris, thanks for coming in again.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.